Okay, let's dive in. So the last few years, well, they gave a lot of us some unexpected downtime, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. A pause.
Right, like the whole world slowed down with the pandemic, or maybe just personal stuff shifted. And, it seems like for some people that quiet space, it became a moment for looking inward.
Yeah, definitely. And our source for this deep dive actually points right at that. It's an article from the Quarter Life Center, Questioning Your Gender Identity.
Ah, okay.
And it specifically mentions that time, being alone, maybe fewer social pressures as a kind of catalyst.
A catalyst for what exactly?
For thinking about gender identity. It seems it created space for people to ask questions they perhaps hadn't considered before or hadn't felt able to.
Gotcha. So our plan today, our mission is basically to unpack that specific article. We're going to pull out the key ideas, the main takeaways it offers about what it means to question your gender.
Right. Focusing just on what this source presents.
Exactly. Trying to understand the journey it describes and maybe find some practical stuff in there for you, the listener.
And the article, it gets right to it. It starts by laying some really important groundwork, validating the experience right off the bat.
Which feels necessary, doesn't it? It seems to push back immediately against maybe some negative ideas people might have.
Totally. Like, the first thing it stresses is that questioning your gender, it's not shameful. It's not a bad thing.
Okay.
It frames it as, a totally valid part of figuring yourself out, self-discovery.
That's a really different way of looking at it than maybe some expect, a reframing.
It is. And the source adds some context, too. It reminds us that, historically, gender hasn't always been just, male-female, the binary.
Right. Or just the idea of being cisgender, identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth.
Exactly. There's a much longer, more complex picture, according to this piece.
And this next point the article makes, this feels really key for anyone just starting to think about this. It says that questioning doesn't automatically mean you aren't cisgender.
Mm-hmm. That's crucial.
It doesn't, lock you into any specific identity outcome.
No, it presents the questioning itself as the valuable part. It's an intentional exploration, it says. Just taking the time to look.
Which makes sense. It kind of ties into how we figure out other parts of ourselves, right?
Well, yeah, the source connects it to identity development generally. Understanding who you are professionally, sexually, your gender, it's all a process. Often a lifelong one.
So no rush.
Definitely not. The article is super clear. Take the time you need. There's no deadline on figuring yourself out.
Okay, and here's something the article states that really challenges some common assumptions. It talks about identities like genderqueer, non-binary.
Or trans, a gender.
Right. And it says you can hold one of those identities and you get to decide whether or not you pursue any medical steps like hormones or surgery.
Yeah, it explicitly says there's no requirement for medical transition to have a valid identity.
That feels like a big statement.
It is. It separates the internal sense of self, your identity, from any outward steps you might or might not take. Your identity is valid regardless, based on this source.
Okay. And what about labels? Does the article say anything there?
It does. It addresses labels directly. It acknowledges that, look, for some people, finding a label can be really grounding. It offers connection, community.
Makes sense.
But for others, labels might feel, limiting, too restrictive.
And the article says
both are fine. It validates both paths. It's presented purely as a personal choice. Use labels if they help, don't if they don't.
Okay, so that's the foundation the article lays. Validation, context, separating identity from medical steps, personal choice on labels. That's quite a starting point.
It really sets the stage. But then it pivots, which is great.
Yeah.
It goes from the why and what to the how.
Right. Okay, you're questioning. So how do you actually explore it? What does the article suggest?
Well, a big one it mentions is expression. Exploring through how you express yourself day to day.
Expression like? How?
It depends, it says, on what changes might feel right for you. What might help bridge that gap between your inner sense of self and, your body or how you move through the world?
Okay, like concrete examples. Does it give any?
Yeah, it does. It suggests things like trying out different pronouns. If the ones you've always used don't feel quite right.
How do you even start with that?
Gently, it suggests. Maybe start with people you really trust. See how it feels.
Okay. That sounds manageable. What else?
Clothing is another one. Your wardrobe. If what you wear feels off, maybe explore different styles. Things that feel more affirming when you look in the mirror.
Finding clothes that feel more like you.
Exactly. And then it also mentions, for folks who feel a disconnect with specific body parts, things like affirming gear.
What kind of gear?
It names things like chest binders, if someone wants a flatter chest appearance, or breast forms, or Maybe packers, prosthetic devices.
Ah, okay.
But again, it presents these as tools for exploration or comfort, not requirements, just options some people find helpful for feeling more integrated.
So expression is one avenue. Pronouns, clothes, maybe gear. What else does the source suggest for exploring?
Content and resources are another big area. It really encourages connecting with gender-expansive content.
Meaning?
Things like books, articles, maybe following creators online, listening to podcasts, finding information and stories out there.
Like seeking out different perspectives.
Precisely. It mentions that gender-focused organizations often have great resource lists. And it even gives a specific example title to check out, the Gender Dysphoria Bible.
Okay. So reading, learning, seeing other experiences.
Yeah, it's about that intellectual and emotional exploration, finding language, maybe seeing parts of your own feelings reflected back at you. It can be really validating.
That makes a lot of sense. Connecting with others' stories and building on that idea of support. The article talks about professional help too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It puts a strong emphasis on therapy.
Like it's recommended or...
It actually calls having a therapist who is competent in trans care critical.
Wow, critical. Why so important, according to the source?
Well, it lists a few key things. A good therapist provides that dedicated space just to explore safely. They understand what being affirming actually means in practice.
Okay.
And this is a really nuanced point the article makes. They know how to hold space for both the difficult feelings, like dysphoria, and the positive ones, like euphoria.
Ah, holding space for both. That sounds important.
It really is. They can also just sit with you in the uncertainty, when you don't have all the answers. And importantly, they can help you identify and maybe challenge some of those negative, oppressive ideas about gender that people can internalize.
Having a guide who gets the landscape.
Exactly. Someone who understands the specific nuances of exploring gender identity.
And you mentioned dysphoria and euphoria there. The article makes a point about that balance, doesn't it, towards the end?
It does, and it's a really powerful one. It notes that often the conversation around trans experiences focuses a lot on dysphoria.
Which the article defines as that discomfort, right? The disconnect between identity and body.
Yeah, that sense of distress or incongruence.
Yeah.
And while the source says acknowledging that discomfort is important,
But
it crucially argues for also exploring moments of gender euphoria.
Euphoria, so the opposite of dysphoria, the good feelings.
Exactly. Those times when your gender just feels right, affirmed, moments of joy or peace or excitement related to your gender expression or perception.
And why is focusing on that so important, according to the article?
Because it states, exploring those moments of euphoria, that's how you get a deeper recognition of your authentic self. It's like a positive signpost pointing towards what feels genuinely you.
So it's not just about reducing the bad feelings, but actively noticing and leaning into the good ones.
Precisely. It shifts the focus from solely fixing discomfort to actively seeking and embracing moments of connection and joy with your identity. It helps define what authentic feels like for you.
That feels like a really hopeful and constructive way to frame it.
It provides positive reinforcement, highlighting flow, connection, joy. It makes the journey less about just tackling problems and more about discovering wholeness.
Okay, so if we pull all that together from this specific Quarter Life Center article, what's the core message?
I think the source presents questioning gender not as some kind of crisis, but as a valid, maybe even necessary part of self-discovery, an ongoing exploration.
Right, and it suggests you can do that exploring through practical things like expression, clothes, pronouns, maybe gear.
And through connecting with resources, stories, information.
And crucially, with the right kind of support, particularly therapy that gets the nuances, that holds space for both the tough stuff and those moments of euphoria.
Yeah, it really outlines a kind of holistic path based entirely on what's in that article.
Which leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? A final thought from the source's perspective.
Go for it.
Well, considering how much emphasis the article places on gender euphoria as a way to recognize what feels authentic, it makes you wonder, how might your own journey of self-discovery change if you consciously shifted your focus? If you move from primarily trying to fix discomfort towards actively seeking out and amplifying those moments of joy and rightness connected to your identity, what might that unlock?